No. Thank you, Michael. Apologize for that. And thank you all. This is amazing. This is wonderful to finally get to present this show that has been so long in the making. And I'm especially excited to introduce my erudite colleague, truly without whom this never could have happened. Jeff?
Hi there, I'm Jeff Durham. I'm the Associate Curator of Himalayan Art over at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. And the first thing that I'd like to do this evening is to thank John Henry, Michael, and most of all the members of the VMFA community for inviting me out this evening to talk to you about my very favorite subject of the moment, which is your incredibly installed exhibition, Awaken. Now, you already know that this is a large and ambitious show featuring dozens of masterworks. So to extract all of the imagery and ideas that went into this show, it might be fun, but I think we'd be here all night. So instead, over the next few minutes, we want to tell you about how this exhibition got here and how we got to making this exhibition. And to facilitate that, first we want to tell you a little bit about Awaken's two key objects. Then, we'll explore some of the show's most impressive artworks and inspiring stories as they unfold. John Henry, maybe you could tell us about the object that first inspired us.
Well, yeah, and backing up just slightly. So nearly 7 years ago, Jeff and I first talked about possibly doing a Himalayan show together. As some of you must know, VMFA has a truly magnificent collection of Tibetan art, and the crown jewel of which is this sculpture of Vajrabhairava, the lightning terror. Instinctively, I knew that I wanted to build a show around this large, stunning object. But I also knew that to execute a show with real substance, I would need a collaborator, someone who is a true specialist in Himalayan art and culture. Providence and that show, Maharaja, that Michael mentioned, brought me to San Francisco and to Jeff. And we struck up a conversation in the Asian Art Museum's Himalayan galleries about art and meditation. The golden moment came when I mentioned this sculpture of Vajrabhairava to Jeff. Not for the first time, I saw a glint in his eye. He said that the Asian Art Museum had some outstanding paintings of the same Buddhist deity, including one that featured him not even 2 inches square at the center of a particular sort of composition.
And the composition in question is a type of painting, a type of diagram called a mandala. A mandala, not a mandala, a mandala. It's a geometric diagram through which meditators journey during visualization. And as you can see in this slide, at its very center stands Vajrabhairava, the very same figure as your crown jewel sculpture here at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Well, after a cappuccino or two, it became very clear to John Henry and myself that the two of these objects could indeed be the nucleus for a very exciting exhibition. The Vajrabhairava sculpture as a kind of a destination, and the Asian Art Museum mandala as a map guiding us to its center. This, then, was going to be a hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell made famous so many years ago. A journey from the ordinary world that we take for granted through a number of tests and trials, hopefully all the way toward awakening itself.
So this formula that we had struck upon after many conversations, presenting the complex art of Tibetan Buddhism by weaving a story around it, a story that we don't simply tell you, but instead we invite you to participate in, is not only innovative and engaging, but it's also accurate to the tradition.
And most, you might say, Tibetan Buddhist art was created expressly and explicitly for supporting just the kind of transformational meditative journeys that we offer to the visitor. And like all heroes' journeys, it begins in the ordinary world.
Daily life's cacophony is deafening, its speed dizzying, its set changes kaleidoscopic. Its pace is stimulating, but it also disrupts our ability to pay attention to the here and now, to be fully aware of ourselves and the intricate patterns of the world around us, indeed to be fully awake. Instead, we catch only fleeting glimpses of deeper meaning and only fragmented reflections of ourselves. Thus, in this first gallery of the exhibition, we enter its dark corridor filled with a chaotic, disorienting video installation, lined on one side by a row of disjointed mirrors. The walk through this gauntlet of mundane images leads to the exhibition's initial piece, a contemporary work by artist Saren Sherpa. The 16-paneled painting suggests the incomplete and disconnected condition in which we ordinarily find ourselves. Individual pieces of the work make bits of sense, but we can scarcely discern what the full picture might be. But before our journey is finished, we will understand how these pieces fit together, and we will encounter in full the figure who here appears only in fragments. Thus, this is the quandary: how to find order in life's fragmentation, how to find a way out of its endless cycles of unsatisfactory experience. It has been the quest of countless people down through time.
So roughly about 2,500 years ago, an Indian prince turned philosopher named Siddhartha Gautama claimed to have solved this very problem, this very quandary. And after years of intensive meditation, he experienced a series of visions. And these visions revealed to him both the structure and the dynamics of the cosmos we inhabit. And with the clarity of an architect's blueprint, he outlined the entire system, which is what you see in the painting on the right. You see 3 poisonous mental states that fuel unsatisfactory experience. The 6 realms into which beings can be born, including hell, we did a guided tour of a couple of years ago at the Asian. And around the rim of this is the 12-linked chain that keeps awareness bound in a tight cycle of negativity, asleep as it were. And these 2 objects, when you go into the gallery, have been artfully placed directly across from one another, as if the painting is the screen on which Siddhartha's vision appears. And what about that hand touching the earth? Look at the sculpture and see how the Buddha is touching the earth right there. What this means is that we are looking at the very moment of the Buddha's awakening. Now we're faced with a question: how have we come to even know of this experience?
We know of it because the Buddha taught what he had seen, the teachings that we call the Dharma. On the left, we see the Buddha doing just this, teaching, with the wheel, making the sign of the wheel with his right hand, and he points out its links with the left. On the right, or rather, these teachings changed. They evolved over time as they spread to new environments. So on the right is another teacher, one named Padmasambhava. He's credited with bringing Buddhism to Tibet, nearly a millennium after its genesis with the historical Buddha. He looks very different, doesn't he? He cuts a very different figure to Siddhartha, right? Gone are the simple robes of the renunciate, and instead he bears a variety of symbolic apparel and apparatus, and his expression is markedly fierce. So what has happened in these intervening centuries that Buddhist imagery has so metamorphosed?
And we actually do know the answer to this question. A form of Buddhist practice called the lightning vehicle, or if you love Sanskrit, Vajrayana, evolved. And this particular form of Buddhism, the Vajrayana, the lightning vehicle, claimed to produce awakening rapidly through a specific technique. And that technique is meditative visualization. It is extremely powerful, but unless it's learned from the right teacher, practices like meditative visualization can indeed be dangerous, which itself raises another question. How does one know the right teacher so that one may safely access this power of the lightning vehicle? Well, we know the answer to this question as well. The right teacher is one who belongs to a continuous transmission lineage. Now, the painting that you're looking at right now depicts precisely such a lineage. At the top of the painting sit a long line of lineage masters, and at their center is the present master, center left, I should say, is the present master transmitting the teachings he has received. Look to his right, and there you're going to see his student receiving the same teachings, just as all the masters before them. But this student, he is someone very special, and as it turns out, he's going to be our virtual guide through the rest of this exhibition. He's a man named Gorampa Sonam Sengye.
And here, he's turned from his teacher, whereas before he was receiving the teachings, he's turned towards us to share those teachings with us. So if you are following along, if you've bought into the prospect that we've offered, and if you're going to join a journey, a Tibetan Buddhist journey toward awakening, first and foremost, you need a teacher. And this is the teacher we offer you, a teacher that knows the spiritual terrain ahead. In preparing us for the meditative journey ahead, he first initiates us performing a series of rites to purify our body, speech, and mind. He presents us with specialized equipment, ranging from weapons, armor, musical instruments, and objects to help focus our attention. With these, we may variously summon forces to our aid, drive distractions away, and vanquish obstacles to our progress. Fortunately, Gorampa explains that we will not be going it alone on this journey, and he introduces us to members of a spiritual support team who will accompany us. They include a trio of bodhisattvas, embodiments of wisdom, compassion, and power, and goddesses who are both mild-mannered and intensely formidable. Lastly, and most importantly, he presents us with that most important piece of equipment for the journey, a map, that mandala that we showed here, a colorful geometric painting that is a two-dimensional representation of the three-dimensional realm into which we will visualize ourselves entering and traversing during meditation. With Gorampa as our guide, we will methodically journey to its center.
We'd actually like you to have this map too, so the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts has literally put it in your hands. And you can grab it in the gallery. From this point forward, using this map and the superb interpretive apparatus that you see on the back, you're going to be able to enter the precincts of the mandala, explore its geography, and encounter its sometimes edgy residents.
Oh, that's where you're picking up the map, right?
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, go pick it up.
Yeah. It's more fun to look at, Jeff. So first, we explore the edges of the painting, approaching but not yet inside the circle that defines the outer edge of the mandala proper. Here in the map's corners are four frightful figures, and their iconography makes clear right away, even before we've entered into that circular mandala itself, it makes clear that the teachings encoded in that mandala revolve around the theme of death. The best known of these figures is the one in the lower right corner. He's called Yama Dharmaraja. Through multiple images in the gallery, we encounter this wrathful, enlightened being. Particularly intriguing among these objects is a flaming trident that is similar to the implements held by Yama Dharmaraja and his consort. Where the front of this ritual object features a prominent skull, the back is unmistakably phallic. Appropriate to the mandala's exploration of mortality, this scepter's symbolism reveals how sex and death are inextricably linked, one literally the flip side of the other.
Okay, now what those four protectors, Yama Dharmaraja, at the corners of our map guard, of course, is the mandala itself. So take a look at the mandala's outermost edge.
I'm going to point.
Take a look at the mandala's outermost edge. It's composed of a ring of stylized fire images, 5 colors, and these colors change as you move around the circuit of the mandala. Then look just inside those flames and you'll see a second circle. This one is thinner and it's pitch black, and through it 16 gleaming thunderbolts or vajras can be found. So this is like a little bitty thin void filled with lightning. First the barrier of fire and then lightning. So at this point, our task is to cross these 2 forbidding barriers. Like I say, one of fire, the other a void punctuated by lightning, and enter the mandala's visionary universe. Once inside this universe, we'll encounter a ring of 8 funereal grounds. You see that strange ring there? They're separated by red rivers, and you can just see them. But these 8 funereal grounds are occupied by bizarre sages meditating, dismembered corpses, scavenging animals, and even the religious monuments known as stupas. Then, just inside these charnel grounds, rise the multicolored petals of a great lotus, understood to be in Tibetan thought as large as the universe itself. Then, upon the lotus's circular surface sits a vast square palace, its gateways facing the 4 directions. Now we, as visitors and journeyers within the mandala, are going to approach the gateway that faces downwards for us, and this is the mandala's eastern direction. Finally, in museum space, we walk through a pair of pillars.
That would have been more useful if you'd seen everything blown up. My bad.
The nice thing is that big or small, it's all intricate in Tibetan Buddhism.
Fire barrier, sort of quantum appearance and void barrier. These are the charnel grounds, body fields, basically.
Well, show them the stupa.
There's a stupa. Yeah. There's a stupa. The multicolored petals of the lotus, and then the top, the pericarp of the lotus, supports this enormous square palace. Yeah?
Yeah, it looks great.
And in the actual space, we evoke this, right, of setting up these pillars and this door hanging through which you must walk to evoke that idea of approaching the gateway, the southern, the eastern, which is the lower gateway of the palace.
You might say crossing the final threshold from the ordinary world into the visionary world.
So having passed, we're now in stage 3 of our journey to the center. Having passed through the lower gateway and into the square palace, we are now able to better discern its layout. And that layout changes colors in each of the directions. We entered on that side that is white, but as we move clockwise around the space, the other quadrants are yellow, red, and green. At the level where we entered, they're the series of courtyards that change color as you go around. Above that, and so considered to be above it and towards the center, and I'll stop turning around, I promise. Sure, go for it. Above that and to the center is another large level story. And its walls, the round walls of that story are in fact made of human skulls. So positioned at every doorway in this palace and guarding every room of the palace are fearsome 6-armed figures. that resemble Tibetan Buddhism's protector par excellence, Mahakala. Guided by Gorampa, as we have been all along, we allow these six-armed fearsome figures to dismantle the egos that would prevent our continued progress. I'll switch it.
Technology is so complicated.
This is Mahakala. Okay.
Finally, only one part of the mandala remains to be explored, and it is that square chamber at the very center. And within its walls, and beyond the grinning skulls and the flaming weapons of war on the impressive doorway that heralds the exhibition's darkest gallery, there stands the formidable deity to whom this mandala belongs. Look closely at this large, stunning sculpture. His fearsome faces, his buffalo horns, his many hands, I believe there are 34, holding weapons, his numerous feet, I believe there's 16 of them, trampling animals that represent our basal instincts. Do you recognize him? Think back to the exhibition's initial contemporary painting, the 16 vibrantly colored canvases. They showed fragments of this deity whom you now see before you in full. He is in fact Vajrabhairava, the lightning terror. And while his appearance is indeed forbidding, we are assured by our guide Gorampa that Vajrabhairava, like so many of the wrathful beings we've encountered, is not an enemy and is not a foe. His many weapons are not directed at us. Instead, they're directed at obstacles to awakening, like negative states of emotion or mind.
And this is because, for all his horrifying imagery, Vajrabhairava is in fact a manifestation of a comparatively serene bodhisattva called Manjushri, the embodiment of Buddhist wisdom. He's one of that trio of bodhisattvas we met when preparing for our journey. Here, his serene face is shown, golden and crowned, rising from the apex of Vajrabhairava's cranium, right between those buffalo horns. Now, Vajrabhairava is also known as Yamantaka, the defeater of Yama, the Lord of Death. And the mythology around this is the real stunner. So Jeff?
So one of the things about looking at a sculpture in isolation, whatever it's made of, wood or bronze or whatever, is that oftentimes one misses the context. Sometimes that context is architectural, but at other times it's mythological, and that's what we're missing in this case. So let me tell you how this image came to be and why Manjushri is sitting on the god of death's head. It does seem to be a mystery, doesn't it? So once upon a time, the Lord of Death was sitting in hell, sucking everybody down to hell and killing them. This is bad. The Buddhas got together and said, we must solve this problem. By this time, there's a whole bunch of Buddhas, by the way. The Buddhas got together and said, we must solve this problem. Who among us is smart enough to do it? Oh, we know. The Bodhisattva of wisdom, Manjushri, with his flaming sword that separates truth from falsity. We'll call him. So that's what they did. They said, Manjushri, Manjushri, the god of death is destroying all life. You gotta help us out here. So Manjushri thinks, and he says, I know just what to do. So Manjushri takes himself down to hell, and he approaches Yama, the god of death. Yama, hey, look over here, look over here. And in that precise instant, Manjushri turns himself into a mirror. So now, what is Yama looking at? He's looking at himself. Now, would you say this is a scary vision? I would say this is a scary vision, and guess who thought so too? Yama. Yama said, oh Manjushri, please make this vision go away. And if you will, I promise to serve the cause of Buddhism forever. And Manjushri says, okay, how are you going to do that, Death? And Death says, by reminding people that they're going to die, so they need to practice now while they're alive. And Manjushri says, done. And that is why you see Manjushri on the god of Death's head. This is not actually the god of death. This is not actually Vajrabhairava. This is Vajrabhairava looking at himself in a mirror.
Exactly. So wisdom, Manjushri, defeated death by urging him to confront himself. So our encounter with Vajrabhairava is likewise an occasion to examine and to reconcile ourselves with the reality of our own impermanence. This is the real, hopefully, cathartic moment in the exhibition, and you've got to trust us. I mean, if you're not moved when you go into this gallery, and it's almost completely pitch dark, and you've got this guy no longer in a big aquarium vitrine, placed a little too high, but he's completely free of that plexiglass, down at your level, staring you directly in the eye. If you're not moved by this, by the visuality of this, maybe you're a sound person. Pretty intense, and it goes on. What that is a famous group of Tibetan monks chanting, and what they are chanting are the verbal formulas used to actually literally invoke this deity, to bring this deity into the world. But you don't. I don't think you need to know that to be impressed by this. Likewise, I don't know that you need to know all the story. It helps. It's nice. But this truly is a cathartic moment.
What is nice is when the museum world and the world that the museum is exploring can present the same information in the same way so that an insider and an outsider can see it on the same page.
And I think people would feel like they definitely got their money's worth if we could have stopped the exhibition right here.
We could have stopped the exhibition right here, but death is only the beginning. Yeah, it really is. Here comes the sun, right? In the exhibition's last two experiences, we dramatically shift from the dark of the mandala's central chamber featuring Vajrabhairava to bright white. And this provides glimpses in the next couple of galleries of what awakening might actually look like visually, if you can imagine that.
So, throughout the course of our meditative journey, we visualize the mandala's environment and its various inhabitants as if they were appearing before us. But a shift of perspective happens inside that central chamber, where we saw Vajrabhairava in front of us, but simultaneously recognized his appearance as a mirror image of ourselves. Seen in the right light, this reflection might amount to a brief glimpse of one of the most crucial qualities of the awakened mind, what Buddhist thought calls non-duality. This is the realization that an apparent object, in this case the visualized deity, is actually non-different from one's own mind. It is a state of experience in which ordinary pairs of opposites like subject and object, perceiver and perceived, even mind and matter are transcended. This transcendence of opposites is visually presented in Tibetan Buddhist art by so-called yabyum, or father-mother images. Paired male and female deities conjoined in sexual union, they visually symbolize the state of non-dual awakened awareness that characterizes the enlightened mind. This is none other than our old buddy Vajrabhairava. But here he is transformed from a solitary figure to one in union with his consort, Vajravetali. His expression is transformed from ferocity to joy, his complexion from deep blue to golden radiance. Each of the other several pairs of yabyum figures in this gallery is distinctive in various ways, but they are all united in their visual expression of non-duality.
And then, at last, we arrive at the exhibition's final experience. It's a long corridor, flooded with light, and at its far end stands, or perhaps we should say floats, a solitary figure. It's a sublimely carved 300-pound stone sculpture featuring a crowned Buddha. Now let's approach just a little bit closer and think back to the hallway in which we began our long journey. It was dark. We were bombarded with images that were fragmented, including our own reflections. It was, in a lot of ways, the antithesis of the corridor in which we're concluding our quest now. For no longer fragmented, our initial experience of chaos has been replaced by one of integration, of enlightenment, of seeing all sides at once, seeing solid and empty at the same time, light and dark as mutually complementary. And so now our minds, much like the yabyum images we encountered, have the capacity to encompass what we call opposites simultaneously. Now approach the crowned Buddha even more closely. We don't have another slide, so you can do this with your imagination. It's a good thing to do. Consider whether what you're seeing is matter or void. Are you looking at solid stone, or are you looking at empty luminous space? Or maybe profoundly, I should ask you a different question and say, is that stone really solid at all? After all, science itself tells us that such matter is, in fact, almost entirely empty space. Now, this is a heady insight to be sure, and I would say that it's one worth contemplating at length. But eventually, we have to go back into the world to chop wood and carry water, as the old Zen saying goes.
So, what insights will you take with you? Will you have a greater appreciation for the sophisticated mental technology of Tibet? Will you see how its art is actually all about awareness?
Or maybe you'll ask my favorite question. Will you ever again take it for granted that you are fully awake? I hope not. Thank you.
Izzy has a microphone, and she will gladly take it to whomever might have a question. If you've figured it all out, we can go.
Fred? Okay, great. If anyone could just raise their hand if they have a question, I'll bring the mic to you so everyone can hear your question.
I'll almost certainly defer to Jeff, whatever it is.
Thank you for that wonderful talk and beautiful exhibit. And I was wondering, if you could tell us a little bit about how these pieces came to be here. I know that now countries are forbidding these types of artifacts from coming out of their countries, and I know that they've probably been in this country for a long time, but I'm just wondering, and they were in private collections, how they came to be here, or an example using one of them of how it might have.
Sure. Well, of course, these objects are currently housed in a variety of places. So the show has 87 objects in it, and about 40% of those are from our collection, about 40% from the Asian art museums, and then we borrowed nearly 20 things from 6 or 7 both museums and private collections. So there are a whole variety of stories. The VMFA's collection really started in the late 60s when we acquired a large portion of a private collection in New York, with which most of our Indian, properly South Asian material came. A couple dozen Nepalese and Tibetan things came as well. And we've continued to collect over the years. The collection grew from that little core to being truly outstanding in the early 90s when again, we bought large groups of things from another couple private collectors. I think that there are a million different stories about how these things got here. Because he's the star of the show, Vajrabhairava, we bought him in 1991 from a dealer in New York. That sculpture had been in the States since the early 20th century. It was collected by a guy whose first name I can never remember. His last name is Barnard. His collection became the core of what's the Cloisters Museum. So he primarily collected medieval European material, but for some reason it ended up with this object that almost certainly came out of China, almost certainly made in Beijing for the imperial court. And certainly I sense that part of your question is about, are these things here legitimately? Whether that was part of your question or not, it's an important thing to consider, and it's something that in the past museums have maybe not vetted objects as closely as we now try to make sure that they did come out of their host countries in a legal manner.
And our collection took shape in pretty much the same way. A gentleman named Avery Brundage was a very important collector in Chicago and Santa Barbara. And so the core of the Asian Art Museum's collection is from his collection. And that came to the Asian Art Museum in 1960, or at least under its aegis in 1960. After 1970, there were UNESCO provisions that were put in place to protect artworks. And so now we are very, very careful about anything we purchase and anything that we exhibit. We want to be very respectful of the cultures of origin and to interpret the objects that are already here in a manner consistent with their culture of production.
Do you see the final statue as void or light?
If you could repeat the question, that was the coolest question ever, that's what I thought it was.
Do you see the final statue as void or light?
Can I answer?
Please.
Yeah. No, my answer would be yes.
And that's not a cop-out, is it?
No. I think we end the catalog. It's really good, by the way. I think we knocked a home run, not only with the exhibition, but with the catalog. And I don't usually compliment ourselves. But I think the very last question in the catalog is, am I in the world, or is the world in me? And we didn't actually write the answer, but our answer is yes.
And it simply has to be, right? I'm sitting here right now, but where am I really as far as you're concerned? I'm in your mind. So who's in whose mind?
It's obviously my Lama, my guru here, these many years.
Is there any significance tied to the coloring with a lot of the images, especially in the mandala, and the images of the initiate and the master? I noticed specifically the circles behind their heads were different colors. Is there a significance attached to that?
You do the mandala first, and then I'll do the other.
Okay, so the simple answer here is that there is a significance to absolutely everything. Now, there is a basic mandala in Himalayan Buddhism, and that mandala is based on 5 different Buddhas, 1 of the center and 4 of the cardinal directions. The one in the center is pictured as white, the one in the east is blue, the one in the west is red, the one in the south is yellow, and the one in the north is green. So those are I'm not saying primary colors in the wrong context, but those are the main colors that are used to indicate directionality within a mandala. But it also goes beyond that. So for example, the color red has certain associations with it. Marpo, it's power, fire. Similarly, the color blue or indigo also has associations with it, like emptiness or shunyata in Sanskrit. So you can understand why Vajrabhairava, the sculpture, is in fact colored that deep blue indigo, or why Simhavaktra, that Dakini that you see in the Allies gallery, is colored red and gilded, if that answers your question.
So yeah, you see these 5 colors used over and over, and it's a shorthand for we're being cosmic, man. You know, I mean, and you will, once you start seeing it, you don't stop seeing it through all the art. And prayer flags are supposed to always be hung, you know, in the same order of those 5 colors. The question about the halos, I don't actually have an answer for, but in that one lineage painting, the teacher's halo is red, and Gorampa, you know, I'm going to circle back. Gorampa's halo is green, and my 11-year-old daughter, who I took through the show before it was open, said to me, there must be some significance here because his halo is green, and then in the other painting of him, when he turns to us to teach, his halo is still green. Something to look into. I don't know if each guy has their own color. But I just have to say, I know there's another question. There were so many happy accidents in putting this show together that it really did feel like cosmic.
It was San Francisco, after all.
We had chosen that image of Gorampa Sonam Sengye as the teacher. We had several options of lamas to choose from, but visually he's the most striking. So we said, okay, Gorampa has to be our guy. And so we're going to build this story around Gorampa. Completely separately, in tackling this question of transmission, we had decided to use that other painting because it was very clear. Okay, teacher teaching to student, mouth to ear, about as clear as you can get. Both these paintings were in the show, and it was only much later, after doing some research to write the book, that I had to call Jeff and be like, dude, you gotta check this out. That painting that we're using, the guy on the right actually is Gorampa Sonam Sengye. We didn't know that we had 2 paintings, the same guy, until we got into this. There were many sort of serendipities like this.
And I think that really highlights the way in which the museum isn't a place where exhibitions fall from the sky fully formed. This is a research institution. And while we are very much interested, maybe primarily interested, in getting this material in front of as many eyes as possible, there's certainly no question about that. Where am I going with this?
Research?
Research, exactly. It has opened so many different avenues for research into various paintings and sculptures. For example, if you go into the galleries and you go into the section on transmissions, you're going to find a tiny little tonka. It's about this big. It's red and blue and looks like it's glowing with nuclear energy. Now go check it out. I had never seen a painting like this before, but in the context of working on this exhibition, I was able to see that it was part of an entire group through the research. So we don't just present exhibitions that have fallen from the sky. We also want to advance that frontier of research, and in that way, help preserve and perhaps even disseminate some of the ideas of the cultures that we're working with.
Jeff, thanks for all the visuals. First of all, they were great. The first Buddha, the one with the fingers down. Yeah. Am I seeing that right? Is he sitting in half lotus?
Most
so
likely.
The initial question here is that the first earth-touching Buddha that we used to illustrate where we introduced you to the Buddha, whether he was sitting on a half lotus.
No, is he sitting in the half lotus position?
Oh, is he sitting in the half lotus position?
Shouldn't be. Let's take a look.
No, he shouldn't be.
We're gonna.
By the way, this is the kind of thing we discover. So wait a minute, did we not see that?
Maybe I didn't see it.
Well, let's take a look. That's the great thing about working with art, is that you can always say, let's take a look.
And we get a little review here. Don't try to go see the show in reverse. Or if that's the case, go see the last gallery and go on. My bad. There he is.
No, he's full. He's
Yeah,
good.
his left foot is tucked up here. Okay, yeah.
First of all, the show is just brilliant, stunning. Thank you so much. And I'm wondering about the trident, because it reminds me of Shiva, Lord Shiva with the trident, maybe Neptune too. So is it Proto-Indo-European, or where do you see that else in art, and what do you think it means?
Wow, there's a dissertation there somewhere. But that particular trident, it's very important in Tibetan iconography. It refers to a number of different things. Threes are huge in Tibetan thought. And this particular trident probably refers to 3 energy channels that are understood to be inside the body, that object symbolically opens up. So that's probably what this particular trident symbolizes. And if you'll recall the sculpture of can we see Padmasambhava? He's right in the next slide, right? Do you see what he's got in the crook of his left arm? That is a similar kind of trident. It's called a khatvanga for you Sanskrit geeks out there. And the symbolism there is also the same. The difference with this particular one that you see behind you is that you've got 3 different heads underneath that trident. Do you see those 3 heads? I guess it's kind of hard to see. I can't see them, but they're there. Trust us.
These 3 heads.
Those 3 heads, one is freshly cut, the second one is desiccating, and the third one is a skull. What do you suppose those things symbolize? Oddly enough, they symbolize what are known as the 3 bodies of the Buddha. So you can already see how in this one trident, it is so loaded with symbolic imagery that if you understand this imagery and can reproduce it in your mind's eye, it's a very effective way of meditating.
And is the Tibetan Buddhist trident related to Shiva? Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. This iconography is all overlapping. It's coming out of the same place at the same time. Tantrism, developing in probably northwestern India, and so it's informing, the iconographies that then diverge, but there are lots of common elements. And is it related to Poseidon? Probably.
Could be. I mean, if you look at Attic vases from Athens, and you take a look at Zeus with his thunderbolt, his lightning, his Vajra, guess what it looks exactly like?
The Vajra, you said it.
Yeah, the Vajra. Yeah. Oh, I said it. Cat out of bag already. Yeah.
Right. But the Vajra, and the Zeus's lightning bolt, yes.
And we
don't
know how the historical connections work, but we know that there's some sort of connection there. We just don't know what it is.
The exhibit is called the Tibetan Journey, Tibetan Buddhist Journey. Is that a distinction from Himalayan or Nepalese, or is Tibetan supposed to encompass all of those? And the one thing I noticed was, at least with Yab Yum, it looked as though with the Tibetan Yab Yum, 1 foot's down, with the Nepalese, 2 feet are up. Could you speak to those topics, please?
So yes, when we say Tibetan Buddhism, we probably could a little bit more accurately say Himalayan Buddhism. But in either case, yes, we're talking about a formation of Buddhism that is by no means isolated to Tibet, or for that matter, the Himalayas. So it's like all Roman Catholics don't live in Italy. You know, you have a formation of a flavor. That's not the right word. And it can travel outside. And the Tibetan versus Nepalese iconographies, absolutely there are differences. I don't know that they're completely stable. So I don't know that I mean, we actually have a Nepalese scholar in the audience. I don't know where she is. Gina Kim, who could get with you on this. But it's not as if all consorts in Nepal have one leg up, one around. It might just be personal preference. But yes, there are differences. And we can tell through various ways. When looking at a painting, we can almost immediately tell, you know, is this, and they're both Tibetan Buddhist, they're both Himalayan Buddhist paintings, but you can usually tell through iconography and style and other hallmarks that you know, where.
And also to answer another part of your question that is important to me, because my galleries at the Asian Art Museum are not called the Tibetan galleries, they're called the Himalayan galleries. So my museum wanted to call this exhibition a Himalayan Buddhist journey towards enlightenment, toward enlightenment. The reason we decided not to do that is because a lot of people don't recognize the word Himalayan, whereas Tibet is readily recognizable. So most of the objects are from Tibet. Some are from Nepal. There's a couple from other locations as well. But because we wanted the exhibition to be readily recognizable and understandable, we overgeneralized in the title and decided to go this way.
Good evening. It's a very basic one as I look to begin this journey. I'm curious, as someone who is looking at the map and going on its way, why is east actually south? And why is it not? Does that mean east is really north? And how does that all play out? How do you associate that and make the journey with a map that's kind of tilted at 90 degrees in my mind?
I mean, I would only play devil's advocate and wonder why east is on the right in your mind. No, and that's not to be a smartass, but really, why? Usually, the perception of direction, I think most commonly has to do with the path of the sun, or the perceived path of the sun, and whether there's something to the sun rising. I don't know.
Okay, let me try something. The short answer to the question here is that, to my knowledge, no one knows exactly why east is positioned down in a tanka. Now, in monuments, we understand why they are oriented towards the east. Many of these monuments receive sunlight and are only lit up at certain times of the year. So, whoa, there it is, a theophany, God manifesting himself or whatever. Now, in the same way, the way that you should enter a mandala is from the east. But what does that mean in the context of a visionary universe that isn't physical? Does it mean anything at all? No. So what the tradition does, is it settles for the practicality of east. And the practicality of east is putting it on the bottom, because you go into the mandala like this, and just like those labyrinths that you see at some great Episcopal churches, you go around like that.
And maybe to clarify, because I just put it together in my head, thank you.
Okay.
This way, the deity at the center, who in most accepted ways of drawing usually has his feet down. This way, the deity can be facing the doorway, the main doorway, the east. Maybe? Something like that? Hypothesis?
I bet you that's right. I bet you that's right. Yep.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Durham and Dr. Rice.